Welcome to the Phenomenal Podcast, an authentic forum where real conversations happen. I'm your host, Phen, and each episode features an unscripted chat with everyday people. Get ready for a genuine, raw discussion. Enjoy the conversation. My people, it is episode 13, and I have Cameron Gaines on with me for lucky number 13. Cameron and I are new friends recently, just met in the last 6 months or so, I think.
I think so.
6 months, and Cameron and his wife joined the life group that me and my wife are a part of, and so we've been hanging out almost weekly now, at least one night a week, just getting to know each other. So why don't you jump in, tell the listeners, tell me more about yourself, since we're actually new friends. So I'm going to learn a lot about you this
this is
session
going to be
well.
interesting. Yeah. Interesting. Yep. But like Phen said, I'm Cameron. Started going to Stephen's church, which is now my church, Mount Perrin North, back in August of last year. And that was a big change for me and my wife, because we were looking for a church that we can get connected with people similar to our age, because our last church didn't have that many people that we can connect with. So we were lacking that, and that was a big thing for us. That was a big move. So we appreciate how quickly we were able to get plugged in and connected with people like you. So that was great for us. But a little bit more about my background. I was raised in a Christian family. I went to a Christian school rather, up until I was in middle school, because there was no Christian high school at that school at the time. So I transitioned out of the Christian school system to the public school system in high school. So that was a massive transition for me. That was it kind of rocked my world for sure.
Right.
But that's where I encountered a lot of different struggles in my life there in high school. Just a lot of different things that I wasn't prepared for. And I had to kind of navigate it on my own. So that definitely tested my faith there. And from there, I still went to church while I was in high school. And that's where I actually met my wife, Brielle. I played guitar in my youth group, and that's where she actually noticed me. So she noticed me on stage and sent me a little message on Facebook. And that's how our relationship got started. So we were like, I was 17 at the time, and she was 18, so she was a little bit older than me. So I was blown away. I was like, oh my gosh, I've got a college girl reaching out to me. Like, what do I do? But of course, I pursued just as much as she pursued. So we've been together ever since. There was like a year after or into dating where she broke up with me. I mean, I was because she was just like, you know what, I want to make sure this is actually real, and make sure I'm doing the right thing, which was fine, because we did end up getting back together, and then we ended up getting married at a young age. Like I had just turned 21. So we dated for 4 years. And we got married. I was 21, she was 22. So we were, we knew we wanted to get married, at that young age. And kind of looking back, we probably should have waited. I mean, not the fact that we shouldn't have gotten married, but we should have just waited the age that we got married, because when we got married, we were both in college, both working a lot. So, and the thing that I was happy about was the fact that we were smart. Like we weren't negligent to the fact that we were just going to get married and kind of figure it out. No, we kind of planned ahead, like knowing we were going to get married. So we were going to have some money to kind of move into a place of our own rather than like live with our parents and whatnot. So that was definitely helpful, because when we got married, we lived in an apartment for a few months and then moved into a house right after that. So that was great. But it was still a growing process for us. in kind of, because that's being married at that young of an age, you're still kind of figuring yourself out, and then you
Right.
introduce somebody else in to that
Right.
relationship. It kind of throws you for a loop, because you're like, oh my gosh, I'm figuring myself out, but I also have to figure out this other person too.
Right.
But that was a growing process for both of us.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, that's kind of my backstory. I mean, I love guitars. I'm a musician. I come from, as much as I wish my career was in music, it's not. Uh, I'm a my schooling was in accounting, so it
Yeah.
was very boring, very mundane. I kind of picked that because knowing we were going to get married at such a young age, I'm like, you know what, I'm going to pick a career that I
Yeah.
can actually make some money from the
Right.
start. Like, and that kind of led me to where I'm at today, which is now out of the accounting field and working with my wife who owns a business. But I'm still doing accounting
Yeah.
within her business, but just not in the same way that I was when I was working in the corporate world. But,
Right.
but
Cool.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I wanted to touch on some of those things towards the end there, but I learned a lot about you just now, so I have
yeah,
other questions before we get into your accounting, corporate, non-corporate stuff, because I'm so interested in the differences and what your viewpoints are on those from being
right.
in both. Um, but question one, I want to make sure I want to ask you. I've been meaning to ask you in person for a long time, but now that I have you here, do you prefer Cameron over Cam?
Honestly,
Or
both.
okay,
A lot of people call me Cam.
yeah,
Yeah, most of my friends call me Cam. So yeah,
okay,
but I will respond to both.
okay.
It doesn't
I didn't
matter.
I didn't know because one time I called you Cam and Josie, my wife, was like, "Hey, I think his name is Cameron. Like I think like that's what he likes to go by." I was like, "Oh, okay." Like
Yeah.
so I just wanted to double check because I mean, I'm Phen. My name is Steven. I
Yeah.
actually don't.
Tell me how. Yeah. Tell me how you got that name.
Sure, I will. I my dad is also Steven, and he went by Steve, and so
Mm.
I was Steven, and we have the same spelling. We're not. I'm not a junior. We have different middle names, but um, so I don't like going by Steve. It's just like people call me that, and I'll respond. Before I used to be like, oh, that's not my name, but now I'm just like, whatever. People are gonna do what they want to do. It's not that
Right.
big of a deal. But I always introduce myself as Steven and when I'm meeting people in real life and things like that. But when I started this journey of creating a quote unquote personal brand, like everyone's saying you should do nowadays to try to make us some side money if it ever takes off, Steven does stuff or anything with the name Steven is like very much taken.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
you know, there is not much out there that I could do with my actual name. But I've never heard someone go by Phen, which is like the last four letters of my name,
Mm.
Phen. And I was like,
Yeah. And
oh,
that's the
that's
correct spelling, by the way. The
oh
VEN. I don't trust those Stevens.
yeah, me
You
neither.
spell it Steven. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that that's a bond we have now.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so Phen, I always kind of liked. I have a friend whose name is Ben, and his last name starts with an F, and I would
Mm.
always call him Phen, and then just like we'd flip the first two letters of his name. So I'd call him Phen. I kind of liked it, and then I was noodling around with a name for myself for this, and I was like, you know what, like there's guys Christophers who go by Chris or Topher, and like
Mm.
there's only I don't know if you've met anybody that does that, but I've met a few people that go by Topher for
Mm-mm.
Christopher, and I was like, I've never heard someone go by Phen, so that was my kind of
Gotcha.
unique thing that I was like, it sounds kind of cool. I like the name, so I'm just gonna run with it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, it's good.
yeah, that's how I got here. Your wife, has she always had that business, or was she doing something else beforehand too?
So, her mom
Yeah.
had a business in the
Okay.
Marietta Square. It was a little sandwich cafe shop. And that's kind of like how her foot got in the door,
Right.
because through her mom.
Yeah.
So she actually worked that was pretty much her only job was working with her mom,
Hmm.
or working for her mom when she was a teenager, and then she served tables at another restaurant, and then was
Yeah.
like, I kind of want to, I don't want to work for people. I want to do this myself, kind of a
Right.
thing. And then that kind of led her to opening up a tea shop.
Okay. That's really cool. Um, I mean, I really respect that.
Yeah.
I'll jump into that a little bit more, but I want to know about getting married so young, because your cousin that we also know, him and
Hmm.
his wife got married pretty young.
Yeah.
Um, it just must run into your family, but
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know. I don't know what it is. It was part of me thinks it was kind of related to our religion, or being a
yeah,
Christian,
yeah,
and to like saving yourself for marriage kind of a thing.
yeah, sure,
That kind of, I guess, played into the part a
yeah,
bit. But I mean, I knew when we were dating, I was like, oh, I definitely want to marry this girl, and
yeah,
she felt the same way. Um, and we were like, well, why should we wait? Kind of a thing. Like,
hmm,
let's go ahead and do it when we're like financially able to do it.
right,
But I still would have waited. Like, no, in hindsight, I would have waited,
mm,
because we, like, being 21 and 22.
hmm,
I mean, at that age, you think there's everything to know about yourself,
right,
and like how you operate as a human.
hmm,
And when you introduce like someone that you're living with together on a daily basis, you're learning more and more about them, but it's kind of
yeah,
conflicting with learning about yourself too. It's like you're paying attention more to the other person than you are to yourself.
right,
So that that kind of caused some issues, because
hmm,
we kind of being married so young, we kind of came dependent on one another,
right,
and not being able to be independent uh,
hmm,
without like in the relationship, because we looked into each other for things, or for validation, or stuff like that, rather than
yeah,
being able to get that within ourselves.
right,
So that's definitely things that we learned the hard way.
yeah,
But I mean, it definitely gave us, um, going through those things, we were able to grow. And it it honestly, it helped our relationship in hindsight, being married that young, because if, and I don't know, it's weird, because like
it's like a
if
double-edged sword.
it's like, yeah, it's like, if we didn't get married at that young of an age, and we didn't go through those things, I can't say that we wouldn't have gone through those things anyways if we had waited. But the fact
Hmm.
that we did get married at that young of an age, um, we're now we're 11 years into our marriage, and we're at a much like better place because of it,
Hmm.
because we know the weaknesses in ourselves and our relationship that we can work on, and we're
Right.
not ignorant to it,
Hmm.
where that we were ignorant to a lot of that stuff at the
Yeah,
beginning of our relationship.
absolutely. I mean, I think Josie and I have been together almost 11 years as well. We're only been married for 3. Actually, tomorrow is our 3rd-year anniversary.
Oh
So,
wow,
yeah,
congrats.
thank you. Whoever's listening to, I had a podcast last night that I recorded. So whoever's listening to these next couple, I'll probably be saying some of the same things. But yeah, so if you listen to the last episode, you already knew that. But we're excited. But we've known each other for 11 years now, and we dated for on and off rate. We broke up a few times. I'm a little older, so I went to college and broke up with her for that first semester of my freshman year of college, just because, I mean, I only went to Kennesaw, so I didn't go very far from home.
Mm,
But it's still like I lived on campus, and I wanted to be able to find out who I was and
right.
explore some things that, looking back, I probably shouldn't have. But I think it's made me a better overall person, because I have
Right.
more perspective about how the world operates
Hmm.
outside of just like within the church walls and things like that, which is all I knew for so long.
Yeah.
Um, and she did the same thing. She went to Auburn, and she went and studied in Italy for a summer, and she took that summer and didn't. We weren't together, and we weren't like in a relationship either. She's like, I think I just need to find out who I am, and this is a good time to do that. So we both did some of that, and I mean, I wanted to marry her from the moment I like met her. I've always just kind of been that way. There's no reason to be with someone if you're not going to marry them, in my opinion.
Yeah, I
So,
agree.
right. So, but we didn't get, I would have gotten married younger, but she had to finish school and all those things. And since I was a little older, I had to wait for that. But I mean, starting to live with a woman is so different. So I can't
Oh
imagine
yeah,
even figuring that out when I was 21 or 22. I was figuring out how to live with other dudes, like, and they think
yeah.
similarly to me. So I couldn't even imagine what it was like starting that young.
Yeah. Some of our saving grace was the fact that we were working so much, or we were
Yeah.
in school. So it's not like we
Okay.
were with each other that much, which it sounds crazy, but it kind of did us good because it kind of it gave us our own separation,
Yeah.
which we needed. I mean, if we
Right.
were around each other too much, it could have been unhealthy. But yeah,
Absolutely.
that was definitely kind of our saving grace there.
It's really interesting. What did you do? Like, what did you work on in college while you were studying?
Yeah. So, gosh, what did I do? I did I worked like 3 jobs,
Wow.
like part time, all part time.
Yeah. Right.
I didn't have like one full time job.
Right.
My freshman year, I worked at Home Depot. I worked
Oh.
for a landscaping company, and then I worked for Brielle's mom at her little cafe.
Okay.
So that was my life for the first year, and then after that, I actually found I got my foot in the door with. Oh no, sorry. Before that, her brother owns a
Mm-hmm.
contracting business,
Mm.
so he offered me a job to work in the office and work with like help facilitate schedules for the contractors and
Mm-hmm.
process invoices for projects and stuff like that. So I did that after Home Depot for like 2 years, and then in my junior year in college, I got an opportunity to actually work in the corporate world of accounting. So while I was
Mm-hmm.
still in college, so that was a blessing for me because
Mm-hmm.
I didn't expect that until after college.
Right.
It was just a nice opportunity to where I could get my foot in the door while I'm still learning.
Mm-hmm.
And it definitely kind of helped kind of excel my process a little bit. Of like once I was fully graduated and out of college, I was able to take on a better role because
Right.
I knew a lot more. And then so I worked at that job for about 3 years, and then I
Mm.
transitioned to a larger role in the corporate world, um, where I managed like 3 branches down in
Mm-hmm.
Florida. Did all their financials for an alcohol distribution company
Oh.
here in Atlanta. So um, that was it was a great job, honestly, but
Yeah.
I don't know. It was just working for other people, and
Yeah.
especially the job that I was in, accounting. I would get into the office at like 8 o'clock, and then I would get home at like 6:30, 7 o'clock, and it was getting home. It was almost depressing because I just
Mm-hmm.
realized how little life I had outside of work.
Mm-hmm.
When it came to the weekends, I was just like, I want to do stuff, but I'm exhausted. I don't want to do anything. Like I want
Yeah.
to be able to have experiences and go out and do fun things, but at the same time, I want to recover
Yeah.
at the same. So it was that kind of like it, it led me to my current job now, to where I'm working with my wife
Mm-hmm.
and doing accounting for her company. But it's a small business. It's
Mm-hmm.
such in a smaller scale. I can kind of broaden my work. So I do a
Yeah.
lot of other things outside of accounting. I've actually learned how her business works.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I've learned a lot of other things that I wasn't aware of prior to working with her. So, um, and it's crazy because it's crazy to say that I work with her now, because we actually worked together when we dated,
Mm-hmm.
and we were on the verge of breaking up because we did
Oh.
not work well together. But we kind of figured it out. And like we knew kind of going into this that this didn't work out well for us last time. What are we
Mm-hmm.
going to do different this time?
Mm-hmm.
and we've figured it out because I do something completely different than what she does.
Right.
So we're not kind of like stepping on each other's toes. And honestly, I don't even like, the only time I see her when I'm working and I work from home. So
Mm.
like because when she works, she goes to the locations and she's
Mm-hmm.
doing stuff from her locations. I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing work at home. So we
Yeah.
have that separation still, even though we work together.
Right. Okay, that's super cool. I mean, I go through the same processes as you. Because I still work in a corporate role. It's a smaller company, so it's a little. It's not like I worked for a Fortune 100 company for a little bit,
Mm,
and they had like 77,000 employees, and like there was no way to get to know anybody. And then I transitioned to my current role where I'm working for a company that has about 200 people, and like I know everybody, and everybody knows who I am, and it's it's a important job. But it's not like life or
right.
death or anything like that. Like, if something happens and I'm out walking my dog, it's like, oh, I'll be back in 15 minutes. And like, so, and I think the COVID and the work from home has really helped,
Mm,
transition people to being able to be a little more flexible with
yeah.
their time, even in a corporate setting. But at the same time, like, I love my job, and if anybody there is listening to this, like, I like working where I work. I like the people I work with, but
Yeah.
ultimately, I would like to get to a point where I am working for myself, because
Right.
then I have the, I have absolute control of my time. If
Right.
I have a client or something like that that needs something, if it's urgent, I'll be like, all right, look, I'm out right now, but I will be back soon and I'll take care of it as soon as I can. Or if it's not that urgent, it's like, hey, I'm busy. I'll get to it tomorrow. But like,
Right.
that's my decision as the owner of whatever I'm doing. So hopefully I get there, but it's going to take some work to build up. And so,
Yeah. No, but I 100% agree. That's the thing that I realized, especially getting older, is that our time is super valuable.
oh
Like
yeah.
where we spend most of our time
Hmm.
is, and I don't want to spend most of my time doing work. I want to be able to do other things too. I want to be able to do the
Right.
things that I find meaning and purpose in. And not,
Hmm.
not to say that you can't find that in work. And I do find meaning and purpose in my own work, but I don't want it to just stop there. There are
Right.
other
Right.
pursuits I have and other things that I want to do.
Right.
So yeah, I 100% agree with that, because I overlooked that when I was growing up. I was like, I'll just work my butt off and I'll
Hmm.
make as much money as I can. But at the end of the day, it doesn't bring you the happiness that you think it will.
Right.
I mean, it gives you a life, but it's not.
Yeah.
Are you happy with that life? Are you content with working 80 hours a week
Hmm.
and missing out on other things?
Right.
And that's something that, like, I feel like this culture kind of pushes, like the hustle
Mm-hmm.
culture out there,
Mm-hmm.
which, because that's something that both me and my wife worked through. Especially, it kind of like cultivated us at the start of our relationship, because we were hustling at the beginning
Yeah.
of our marriage to make sure it worked financially. So
Right.
um, and kind of like breaking free from that was a little difficult, because that's kind of all we knew, and it was
Yeah.
taught kind of both by our parents too.
Yeah.
Like our parents know like you got to work for your money, you got to work hard, and that's valuable.
Mm.
But there needs to be a line somewhere, and it's about finding where the balance is, because you can
Yeah.
lose yourself. You can lose yourself if you don't pay attention. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a dangerous place, because you can avoid a lot of things in your own life and your own self, that you can that you shouldn't avoid. I mean,
Right.
that was me, with my relationship with God. I avoided it
Mm-hmm.
for a long time, just because I was I had other things my focus was on, whether it be
Right.
work, whether it be other hobbies. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't give any. I gave very little attention to God,
Mm-hmm.
and part of that was the big, like I said earlier, when I went kind of transitioning from a Christian school to a public school,
Mm-hmm.
like kind of like you, I only knew what was within the walls of the church.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went outside of those walls of the church and to see the worldly culture out there, it
Mm-hmm.
was, it definitely shocked me. And it, it kind of impeded a lot of my relationship with God because I didn't really, at that young of an age, my relationship wasn't that strong.
Right.
So to kind of like go out in a worldly culture and be easily influenced by things,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of, it didn't set me up for success. I'll say that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't till I got older where, after going through some things where I had to kind of take a step back and really view God how I was supposed to view him,
Mm-hmm.
and not view him in the way that the world views him.
Yeah.
Because that's what I learned
Yeah.
going to a public school, was learning God from their point of view, not from who he is in the Bible. And not like, in some
Yeah.
churches don't even teach how he is in the Bible
Yeah.
too. So that was, that was a big thing for me, and that helped me get, uh, that helped my relationship and helped me get back into the place where I needed to be in my walk with God.
Yeah. For sure. That's such a cool story. I mean, I think there's a lot of us. I have a similar story, and a lot of people do, where um, they walk away, they experience the world for a little bit, and they come back. We're all like the prodigal son, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but it's heartbreaking that there's also so many, if not more, who walk away and stay away, um,
Mm.
because that's just because they never understand who God is in Scripture, or who He is personally to them. They only, like you said, they only see Him as what the world says
Yeah.
He is. And I was saw some comments on an Instagram post the other day. Someone said something about their faith, and someone responded about how organized religion is just like some ploy from the government to keep us controlled and things like that. And it just broke my heart hearing, like, reading
Yeah.
that. And I was like, one, that's not right. Two, in this day and age, and this is the conspiracy theorist coming out in me, if it really was a
Sure.
ploy from the government to control us, I think they'd be pushing it more instead of like trying to downplay it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
because they're pushing everything else for us to be indoctrinated by. They don't want us to know that there is something out there that brings
Yeah.
true freedom and joy and grace and things like that. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, I could go down that rabbit hole with you too, because I'm with you on some of that stuff, because it does, like you said, having a relationship with God does bring a sense of joy, that you can't get, that you can't get from the world.
right.
And I feel like the world kind of wants you to think that the joy that you can only get joy from the world. You can't get it
Mm-hmm.
from a God that, who knows, exists to them.
Right.
Um,
And it's a
so
God that just plants rules, and you can't have fun, and you can't do this, and you can't do that, and
yeah,
it's just like, you can look at it that way, or you can look at it a way as like, my life is better because of these principles that I
right,
live by.
right.
So
No, and I looked at it that way
yeah.
because when I there was a time, and I think my biggest struggle with my relationship with God was based on the question of, okay, God, why does bad things happen to good people?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
That's a tough question. It's a loaded
it is a
question.
tough question, but what now I understand is that, um, there are no good people. Like we're all
Oh,
sinners.
yeah.
Like, so bad things just happen because we live in a sin fallen world. Um, but in asking that question, I was kind of elevating myself and
Mm-hmm.
saying, you know what, I could do better than you, God. Like,
Yeah.
that was just, me saying that I don't trust who you are. And it was because I didn't know him. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
only knew him how I learned him from the world, like, which was which was scary because it was just seeing God as just an all powerful being and missing on the love
Right.
aspect of God, that's all he is. He is love.
Hmm.
And understanding that and learning more and more about that, just kind of like it made that question not matter anymore. I'm like, I have to trust. And that's
Yeah.
where the faith comes in,
Hmm.
is trusting and believing that God is good. But we
Right.
live in a world filled with sin, and
Hmm.
that is the world that we live in. And we have to live with those consequences. It's not because of God, it's because of us.
Right. Absolutely. Um, and there's like part of me doing this podcast. I didn't intend for it to be like a faith based podcast,
Sure.
but all the people I know are like, not all the people, but most of the people I interact with and am friends with. I have friends who are not believers, but most of the people that I actually like spend time with are, and everyone that's coming on, and we just dive into these conversations, and I love it. And
Yeah.
I hope that people are still listening and that are like, hey, like these guys have lived a different life. They've lived out in the world, like
Yeah.
I did in college. I mean, I drank, I smoked weed with my friends. I, was out too late and do all the things, like that
Right.
that people would, and nothing satisfied me. And so I hope that people are listening to this and understand that, like
Yeah. Same. Same.
it's it's so much better this way. I feel better physically because I'm
Mm-hmm.
not just trashing my body all the time.
Oh yeah.
Right. I feel better spiritually, mentally. It's just there's so much happiness. There's so much joy that comes from coming back to
Yeah.
where the roots were.
No,
So
100%. That you kind of spawned a question out of me
yeah.
because I know you're doing a lot of hard things. It seems
Mm,
this year, and you're doing 75
75 hard.
hard.
Yeah.
Tell me about that, and tell me why you wanted to do that.
Yeah. So I have the podcast episode. This one that's airing is going to come out in July.
Okay.
But tomorrow is June 5th, and I have an episode coming out with a friend who did it himself. And
Oh wow.
yeah, so we talked about it a lot on that episode.
Okay,
And
I'll definitely listen to that.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was like, you know what? Like, and his progress pictures or like night and day. Like, I mean, he was already an active dude. He went to the gym every day and he was fit and stuff like that. But being so intentional in working out twice a day, drinking a gallon of water, I got beef with that, but I'm still doing it.
Mm,
Um,
that's
and
yeah. That's got. I have to say that's got to be the hardest part for
yeah,
me. I would think
yeah,
a gallon of water would be the hardest part.
it's pretty tough. And I mean, honestly, since I've been working out harder and longer, I do drink more water because my body
Hmm.
wants it. But I don't think that you should force yourself to drink a gallon of water if your body is not asking you to. So, um,
True.
like I think as a culture, the Americans have put in so much emphasis on consuming copious amounts of water when
Yeah.
you don't necessarily need to do that unless you're like if you're thirsty, drink water and drink until you've quenched your thirst. But
Yeah.
if you're not thirsty, don't just force yourself to drink a gallon of water because it's quote unquote good for you. Um,
Right. Right.
so that's my beef with drinking a gallon of water. But everything else, like eating clean. I mean, I really want some ice cream. I really want some sweets. But like other than that, like
Yeah.
it's good for me. I'm feeling better. Um, no alcohol. I didn't. I mean, I go through periods where I would drink more than I would and stuff. But it's never been like, oh, I can't live for 75 days if I don't have any alcohol.
Right. Right.
Uh, so it's just like a lot of the stuff I was already doing. Now it's just I'm being intentional about it. Actually, reading
Mm,
I didn't ever read. So now I have to read 10 pages a day,
okay.
and so that's a new thing for me. And it's honestly one of the things that I like think about the least. It's like, oh shoot, I need to go read now because
Is it
was,
any book,
it's a
or does it have to be? Oh, go ahead.
nonfiction book.
Nonfiction. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So it's not just like go off. I think I listened to his podcast about it. He's like, don't just go off into like fantasy land and like listen, like, read some book and have fun. And it's like, do
Yeah,
something
yeah.
that's like productive. So the book that we're reading together, Becoming a King,
Hmm.
is the thing that I've been reading. So I actually read
Yeah.
chapters 1 and 2 twice, and then um, just to get 10 pages in before to meet, and then I'll start chapter 3 and 4 now.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so it's I'm just trying to be, and the conversation we had this morning, Cameron and I actually already talked this morning in person. We were with some other guys, and we were talking about becoming a stronger man because of the book we're reading. And that's really what I'm going for. Is just like
Mm,
I'm tired of being a watered down man. And
yeah.
I want to be a man that someone looks at and says like that guy means business. I don't want to mess with him. I don't want to question him unless like there's really good reason to. Uh,
Right.
and but then I want to love my wife well, and I want to love my kids well once I have them, and I want to love people around me well at the same time. So how do I
Yeah.
become the strongest version of myself, physically and spiritually and mentally, but also continue to be a a loving and caring person? So
Mm,
it's a tightrope that I'm trying to figure out how to walk.
yeah.
So
Yeah, that's such a cool journey to be on, I have to say.
I'm
Um,
excited.
is have you ever done anything like this before, or were you just like, you know what, I'm gonna do something extremely challenging because for one, I know I can last, or I
Yeah.
can face that challenge. But what kind of led you to this?
Yeah, the conversation with my friend and honestly seeing his physical results really kind of pushed me towards it because I've always been, I've never enjoyed working out. And like if I wanted to do cardio, I had to get in a form of like I'm gonna go play basketball with a bunch of people, or I'm gonna
Mm,
play tennis. I don't do that very often, but like it's like I hated running. I hated like doing that. And then lifting weights was always so boring to me. It's just like I'm just wasting time in the gym. Um, but and so because of that, I've always been kind of like just a scrawny, average white guy. You know, I'm not very tall either. So like
mm,
I just I don't know. But this year, Josie and I both started going on. Honestly, everything stems from her. She kind of drives a lot of things for me. So she changed her diet, and therefore I changed my diet. Um,
yeah.
and she went down this path of exploring what makes her feel better and whatnot, and doing research. And so we moved towards an animal based diet where we're eating more protein, more red meat, more less vegetables, more fruits, more raw milk, raw cheese, raw honey. And I started taking supplements that are like literally beef organ supplements. I'm taking
Mm.
one that's just like liver and bone marrow, and then beef testicles and things like that.
Oh
Yeah,
goodness,
yeah. So, but
that's
ever since
serious.
it is serious, but since I started doing that, I have had like a longing in my soul has erupted to become
Really?
a man. Like I enjoy going to the gym now. I I want to get stronger. I want to be. I don't want to be that watered down. No, I said earlier, I don't want to be a watered down man anymore.
Yeah.
I honestly, I kind of want to shift the paradigm completely, and I want people to look at me and be like, "Oh, you're one of those toxic masculinity guys." And like, no, I'm not toxic. You can look at me that way, but I am the man that God intended me to be.
Mm-hmm.
Someone
Yeah.
who someone who leads my family well, someone who cares for my wife deeply and intimately, cares for his children, is there for them, but also you get stuff done. Like
Right.
so
Dude, that's awesome. But all I heard from that was
uh,
that the secret is bull testicles. Like
yes,
that's that's
yes,
all I heard.
yeah. So shout out Heart and Soil. I've been
Oh,
pushing
I
that.
was actually I was actually looking at their Instagram page the other day because I was curious
Yeah,
in it, going like following an animal based diet,
yeah.
because I've heard of the carnivore.
Hmm.
I didn't want to do anything like that extreme, but I was reading about their animal based diet,
Mm-hmm.
which it looks pretty solid.
Yeah.
I have to say that like it is like that is completely different than what the world tells you like how to eat.
Yeah.
Which
And
it,
part of me, like you just said, like if the world's telling me one thing, I'm tending to believe the exact opposite of what it's saying.
yeah,
So there's a lot of research that says like red meat raises your cholesterol and that's not good for you and all these things. But
mm-hmm.
then there is other research that is not paid for by pharmaceutical companies that
Right.
says as long like if your cholesterol is high, but then like also look at these other metrics like sure there's a correlation between people who have high cholesterol here and are obese and everything and they have a higher rate for heart disease. But if you look at these other people who have high cholesterol and are physically active and fit and have a higher, there's two types of cholesterol or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
those both things, like their risk of heart disease is like less than the average person who doesn't have high cholesterol. So
Mm-hmm.
it's just this guy, I listened to his podcast. I think I actually said the same thing last night. So it's a big it's a big topic that I'm going through right now. But it's we're doing research and medical doctors are validating these things. Um,
Yeah.
who are pushing against the norm because they're like, hey, there's more data out here that supports other hypotheses. So
Yeah. No, I've heard that. There's another podcast that I listen to they talk about like they kind of break down like all these different research points on like how we eat today as a society
mhm,
versus how we are supposed to eat.
right,
In a lot of ways, I think that they kind of one of the things that they were talking about was the how fat was demonized.
yeah,
Uh, like when like they'd have fat free milk and like
hmm
low fat milk or low fat options, no fat options.
hmm
Um, I think that took off in like the 90s, early 2000s,
hmm
and you it's scary to think that when we demonize something, how quickly we can all everyone as a culture just kind of like go like follow that advice, and we're kind of blind to it because we don't know the repercussions of that, and now we're starting to see the repercussions of a low fat no fat diet. I mean
yeah,
we need that. Who says that we don't need that?
right,
Like,
right,
and like some of the research that you're talking about, like I want to look at the like who were the participants, like what was their, were they just like couch potatoes and they're the ones that
hmm
they're the ones that's testing the people, or they're being tested and they're getting those results. Like
right,
you have to kind of like go further into the analysis and like look into the research of like look at the fit people, like look at all the different
yeah,
aspects. You can't just
right,
zone in onto one portion of the population.
right. You're one of the things you said about fat. It spurred me in. I was listening to a Joe Rogan podcast with the founder of Heart and Soil. It was from
Mm,
2020, but I listened to it just like the other day, and he mentioned it, and it reminded me. So I actually did a quick Google search while you're talking. The Wall Street Journal, no, sorry, the New York Times. This is an article from 2016. The title is "How the Sugar Industry Shifted Blame to Fat," and the first line says the sugar industry paid scientists in the 1960s to play down the link between sugar and heart disease and promote saturated fat as the culprit instead. Um, and
mm,
so this just came out recently that like this happened in the 60s, and since then they really destroyed the American diet. Um, so
100%. Yeah. Yeah. I talk to like my grandparents
mhm,
from time to time, and they'll tell me like how their diet was,
mhm,
and it's vastly different than what it is today. I just it's if you take a second to kind of like think about what you're consuming on a
right,
day to day basis, it can it can be scary because you think about all these people who are getting sick, even like younger people who are getting
yeah,
sick. Um, what is that coming from? It's got to be coming from what we're putting into our bodies,
mhm,
and it's got to be coming from like kind of like our own negligence about like just blindly trusting.
yeah,
people out there that, okay, you can eat this and don't eat this.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do your research. You have to really analyze what you put in your body, and
Yeah.
not just like do your research. You have to like do your research around trusted individuals and
Yeah.
check those
Right.
sources. And like you said, it shouldn't be coming from pharmaceutical companies. Like that
Right.
shouldn't be backed. Those shouldn't be the ones that back
Right.
all these food researches.
Right. 100%. We went to the farmers market in Marietta Square
Mm.
on Saturday. We got some fillets from like one of the farmers, and the guy out there is like, "Hey, would you like to try?" Not to us. He said to someone else. He's like, "Would you like to try our antibiotic-free, grass-fed, grass-finished beef?" Like, and it's handing people cards, and someone's like, "No, I like my food with antibiotics in it." Um, and he was like, "Well, that's okay. That's fine. You do what you do, you kind of thing."
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
just so funny. It's like, why are we pumping like all these antibiotics and GMOs into these things that are then coming into our bodies? And like, I don't know. You don't need the same type of antibiotics that a cow does, or does a cow even
Right.
really need that? Like, sure, they could get sick, but so can we. Like, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. Like, yeah. I wonder why did they think that was necessary?
uh,
Like at
uh,
what point?
I guess the thought process is that you have to make sure that you can feed the country, because the U.S. is so big that
True.
they're just pumping all these things into animals to keep them alive longer or to beef them up quicker and things like that. But something else the guy was talking about is regenerative farming,
Mm-hmm.
and how, like, you know, I forgot what it's called, but they're basically cows that most people eat are, for the last 20% of their lives, are like fed in a small environment. They're all crammed together and everything. But
Mm-hmm.
all cows for the first 80% of their lives originally live on a farm and are like eating in the grass and everything like that.
Right.
But they are moved from there to this other thing where they are, being force fed and in terrible conditions and things like that. So the
Yeah.
thought process is that, like, regenerative farming doesn't scale well. But his
Mm-hmm.
his argument to that was like, we're already doing it for 80% of the lives of the animals.
Mm.
Like,
Yeah.
so I don't know. I haven't done a ton more research other than just like listening to him about that topic. But
Sure.
when it comes to eating stuff, all I know is that I feel better than I ever have. I have a stronger desire to be better than I ever
Yeah.
have. And the only big thing that I changed was my diet, and I started taking those organ supplements.
Mm.
So,
That's awesome though.
right. And one of my
So,
friends who's in med school is also switched to this diet, and he said,
oh
like,
wow.
even if I live 5 years less, because apparently I do end up with heart disease, at least I enjoyed my life and I enjoyed what I was eating. And I
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
like, sure, I guess that makes sense. I don't think we'll live 5 years less, but if we do, that's whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. That's true though. Like if
Yeah.
you're gonna eat something, even if you live 5 years less, I guess be able to enjoy it.
Eat a steak.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. I love steak, man. Actually, I get steak from this company called Wild Pastures.
Oh, cool.
It's it's like that other company, Butcher Box.
Yeah.
They're grass fed,
Mm-hmm.
grass finished, but exceptional. I love it. I love it so much. I
Yeah.
always look forward to it every month when that box comes in and I get that steak. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna at least have one good meal
Yeah. Right.
this month.
Right. That's funny. We
Yeah.
got a quarter of a cow from a farm in Georgia.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So we've been eating off that since the middle of February. We got it, and
Wow.
yeah, so we've been enjoying pretty much ground beef every day that we're at home.
Mm.
Ground beef or a steak or a chuck roast, and so we got lots of good stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. So another thing I kind of want to ask you is what what spawned the podcast? what
Yeah,
spawned this podcast.
I want to ask you the same question after I answer mine.
Sure.
So,
I'm first, so you go
yeah,
first.
okay. I don't really know. I listened to podcasts for a while. I mean, like everyone, it's kind of like blew up, and I actually really wanted to start a golf podcast, a golf specific podcast, and so
Yeah.
I tried to do that with some friends, and they both have two kids, and it's tough to coordinate schedules and things like that. And
Right.
so we got 10 episodes, maybe 11 episodes there, and it was going okay, but like I was coordinating everything, and it was hard to keep up with them basically. And so
Yeah.
I kind of and I've been trying to build this Phen does stuff brand for a while, and so I kind of was like, you know what, I think I still want to try to do a podcast. It's
Right.
overall it's low hanging fruit. Like I record after work, like we're doing now for an hour. We'll have a conversation, and then I just slap some. I don't do a ton of post production or anything like that. The whole
Right.
process maybe takes me an hour and a half. You know,
Oh, okay.
um, so it just you just throw it out there, and if anybody listens, we're normal people, you and me, and everyone that I
Yeah.
talk
Yeah.
to on this podcast is a normal person, and someone can learn something from you, from me.
Sure.
If we distribute it wide enough, someone can get something out of any conversation. So that's kind of the
Yeah.
mindset that I've been taking, that I've been trying to do with this, and just get to know people better if they're willing
Yeah.
to talk to me publicly about their lives. So, you
Yeah.
know,
No, I think that's such a cool thing. Like for one, I'll say that you do an amazing job at it, and you're a natural for sure. But to have that, like, that mindset about it of, you know what, let's have normal people talk who are
mhm,
relatable to a lot of people. Because a
yeah,
lot of the podcasts that I listen to, I guess it comes from people who have more of a status in our culture,
yeah,
um, or I guess already have a name for themselves. So they have kind of this cult following already.
hmm,
And I can't really, I kind of take some things with like a grain of salt, because I'm like, can that be relatable to my life?
right,
Like, because I feel like the people that I listen to were vastly different.
right.
Um, so what you have going for you, I think it's a really cool thing, and I'm
Thanks.
happy to be a part of it. So
Yeah, I hope it takes off. I mean, and I'm not going to sit here and say that if someone who does have some type of clout or status was willing to come on the podcast, I'm not going to say no. You
of
know,
course, no, you
but
have to say yes.
right. But like at the end of the day, I do hope that my friends want to keep doing this, that I have repeat people on and just be like, hey man, like last time we talked, we were talking about this. It's been a couple weeks. How you doing? What's new in your life? What You're a normal person. What's going on? What are you struggling with? What are you succeeding in? So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, no, and that's what I really like about you. You're very relatable, and you're easy to talk to. Um, and that, I feel like you don't get that from many people. They kind of seclude themselves, or like hide a portion of who they are.
hmm,
They don't really, like, they're not as like vulnerable as maybe they should be at times. But
mm,
that's what I really like about you, and I can see that that's kind of coming into fruition within this podcast. So that's really cool to experience.
thanks, man. I really appreciate that. I've always
Yeah.
like at a service in high school. It was a worship service, and the guy who was leading like stopped playing and was like, you know what, I just feel like everyone needs to be prayed for. So I went up and he prayed for me, and he was like, the thing he said is like, God wants me to tell you that like being vulnerable is not a sign of weakness. It's actually
Mm,
a huge sign of strength. And so
100%.
I've tried to live that way. And it's really nice hearing people validate that. And I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want it to go to my head or anything like that, but like, it's still nice to hear that the things I'm working towards, people are seeing. So I appreciate that.
No, I agree with you there. I feel like I could go on and on
Yeah.
about like vulnerability, because that is something I kind of dealt with for a while. Not kind of closing myself off to people and not really being authentic. But I had to learn the hard way. Like, if I'm not being vulnerable with even myself, how am I going to grow?
Right.
Like, how am I going to address the weaknesses within myself? Because, and like you said, it's not a weakness. It's courage to kind of face what your weaknesses are within yourself and to refine that and become a better person. But that, I feel like that is you, and that is coming to fruition in this podcast. So it's fun to be a part of.
Well, thanks, man. I really appreciate that. The podcast is like the phenomenal podcast, and then the subtitle is an authentic forum. So like that's all I want is to be.
Yeah.
I want to be authentic. I want people who come on to be authentic. And going back to the toxic masculinity thing, I don't think that being vulnerable takes away any type of masculinity. Which some people would say it does. Like, as a masculine man, you need to mask your emotions. You can't show any weakness. You can't do all that stuff. And I think that's so backwards. Like, you know? So
yeah, and that you're right. However, I'm not going to say vulnerability is ever bad, but I don't think it should also swing way far in the other direction too.
Right.
Because then you lose your masculine soul. You lose that aspect that God has created us for. But it's definitely important to be authentic with other people and with yourself. But being authentic with other people is, for one, it's kind of a breath of fresh air, because you're like, oh, I know who you are and you know who I am. I don't have to hide behind this facade. I don't have to be this person who I'm not actually.
Yeah.
Just for the sake of your presence.
Right.
It's definitely comforting to be authentic around people.
For sure. I love that. That's a good point. And it's actually one of the biggest things I learned in my prodigal son days is like, I never lost my faith, even when I was doing a bunch of things I shouldn't be doing. And I was living a hypocritical life, and it made me bitter towards other Christians because I thought they were too. But really it was just me. But I did notice that when I was out in the world, people were more willing to talk to me about their faith because I was living a normal life, you know? Yeah. And so as I've come back and I'm not doing those things anymore, but I don't keep myself from being in situations where stuff like that's around, and I don't mind being different in those situations now. But like, I mean, I have a pretty filthy mouth a lot of times. I do a pretty good job about not saying things in church settings or with certain people and things like that. But like when I'm out with just like normal people, I swear a whole bunch. I do normal things because it lets people know that I'm living an authentic life. Like, I am who I am.
Right.
My faith is at the core of who I am, but I'm not going to let that make me be a dingy, annoying Bible thumper that everyone hates, you know?
Right. Right.
So.
Yeah. And like you said, you want to be able to reach people, but you're not going to be able to reach people if you're not relatable.
Right.
That's just exactly making yourself available. Like I just kind of, I talked about this in one of my episodes, but the aspect of kind of living in a box, so to speak, as Christians, it's easy for us to kind of seclude ourselves to only live around other Christians. But when we do that, how can we reach other people?
Right.
For one, we're kind of closing ourselves off, but also being closed-minded at the same time. And not being able to be relatable to people is, how are we going to reach those who need to be reached, you know?
Right.
So I think that's vitally important as a Christian, is to not lose yourself at the same time, to be your authentic self.
Right.
And that's who God wants you to be. He doesn't want you to, he doesn't want you to be another person, become another person when you walk in a relationship with him.
Right.
Not he has a calling for you, and part of that is being authentic with
Yeah.
yourself and with him.
Absolutely. I love that. So that's a long-winded, circular answer of how this podcast started, but
Yeah, I
uh,
like it.
we're at the hour point. I still want to hear about how you started your podcast, but after that, I'll probably have to
Sure.
skedaddle. But I do want, because you just started your own podcast. You have 2 episodes released now,
Yep.
Sanctified by Christ podcast. So go ahead,
That's correct. Yep.
jump into
Yep.
that.
Yep. So it was, I guess I was, my prayer this year was, God, let me do something that honors you and pleases you.
Mm,
I don't want to do something that honors myself or just is for my own sake. And I was doing a lot of thinking about it, like, okay, what should it be? How should I do it? And I was in church one day, and I felt like this question pop in my head, like, why don't you just start a podcast? Like,
mm,
why don't you talk about God and just do a podcast?
mm,
And I was like, oh, just thinking about it, I was like, I don't know. I'm not that kind of person that can talk. And thankfully, like, we're doing this, and I have you to kind of lean on right now, because if I was without a script by myself, my mind would just be running and it'd go
yeah.
all over the place. But
Yeah.
I was kind of wrestling with that question, and I even I even talked to Brielle about it, my wife, and I said, I feel like I should start a podcast about kind of like my walk with God,
Mm-hmm.
and talking about God, that being the core of it. And I was like, but I don't know. What if nobody listens to it?
Mm,
And she said, like, what if one person listened to it that needed to listen to it,
mm-hmm.
and it changed their life? Is that enough? And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, 100%.
Yeah.
And what I'm coming to find out is that I feel like in doing this podcast, it's actually changing me
Mm,
more as a person than it is than how I think it would change other people. So I'm not looking for a bunch of listeners. How my podcast is I'm talking about our like sanctification journey and like different aspects of that and what it looks like in our daily lives
yeah.
to walk in relationship with God, and how he wants to refine us and become more and more like him each day. Um, so in doing that, I'm having to read the Bible and learn more
Mm-hmm.
about specific aspects of our faith walk. And it's changed me. And I've done 3 episodes so far. I haven't released the 3rd one yet, but in just those 3 episodes, I'm like, wow, I'm like, God, this might not even be for other people. It might just be for me. It might just be like
Mm-hmm.
a journal that I'm talking about for other people to listen, but
Yeah.
it's changing who I am. So that's kind of like the short rounded answer for that, but it's definitely been a fun experience,
Mm-hmm.
and it's been, for one, like, I'm pushing myself outside of a comfort zone for me, because for one, I was never a public speaker, and I know that you're still
Yeah.
kind of behind a computer, but
Yeah.
you're still putting yourself out there.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Um, and I just had to kind of like go to God and be like, you know what, God, I'm going to do this because I feel like this is what you're calling me to be.
Mm-hmm.
And why should I be ashamed to talk about you?
Yeah.
Like, it should be natural.
Right.
So let me just record myself talking about you and my faith journey. So, and maybe people will listen to it, maybe they won't. But at
Yeah.
the end of the day, if no one were to listen to it, if I had 0 listeners,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't care.
Yeah.
It would still be, God is changing me through this, and that is all I want.
Oh, that's super great, man. I love to hear that. And like one of your things, like you said, like, why wouldn't I want to be open about my faith or something along those lines? And I've had similar thoughts. It's like, because my platform, while it's not like specifically faith based, like that's who I am. So like these
Yeah.
conversations are going to come up, and I've thought about like, oh, what if like I don't get certain sponsors that I dream about getting because of my views on things and stuff like that. And then at the end of the day, I think about that and I'm like, that would stink. But then I think about like, no, but like, this is who I am. This is who God is.
Right.
Like, I'm
Right.
going to shout it from the rooftops, and then this is my platform. So if someone doesn't want to listen because of that, then like that's okay.
Yeah.
I don't have to be as tiptoeing around the line and like the red tape that I do in a corporate setting, because this is for me, and this is for
Right.
whoever wants to listen. And
Yeah.
if our conversation, someone smiles, someone laughs, someone takes one thing away from, I think I was successful. And
Yeah.
so,
Hey, I laughed and I smiled in this episode. So yeah,
there we go.
Very successful.
Absolutely. And I love what you're doing. I've listened to both of your episodes and they're great. Your production value is spot on. So
Thanks, man.
I commented on your first one on Spotify. I don't know.
Yeah, I saw it. I saw it. Yeah.
Because I was so impressed with how crisp and clean and clear like your voice was, and you stuck to your script very well. So
Yeah.
if someone's still listening to this and wants to check out Cameron's podcast, you definitely should. They're like 20 minutes or so.
Yeah, I'm not going to go beyond 20, 25 minutes. I wanted to be short and concise, kind of get to the point, but
yeah, so they're quick. It's a quick listen. He does a good job, and yeah, so I have so much more that I want to talk to you about music and how guitars, and I still want to dive more into corporate versus working for yourself, but I do have to jump on. So maybe you'll come back on in the future, and we can dive more into other things. So.
I'd love to, man.
Very cool. Well, Cameron, I thank you so much for your time, and any listeners, I thank you for your time as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Stephen.
Oh, I will link Cameron's stuff in the description of these videos and stuff. So if you guys want to check it out, there'll be a quick link. Other than that, you guys have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much for listening to this episode. Your support means the world to me. If you enjoyed this podcast, make sure to follow on whatever platform you're listening on and send it to a friend. If you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, leaving a review really helps boost my exposure. If you're on YouTube, make sure that you're subscribed and liking every video. It really helps the algorithm. Links to all my and my guest socials, along with music credits, are in the show notes. I love y'all. Love, Phen.